Hi, it's Chef Crystal from Crystal Dawn Culinary. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm so excited to show you my Apricot Cacao Superfood Granola bars. These are my go-to granola bars to make as a snack during the week. They're great for meal prep. They're great for any time of the day. They're so nutritious, but they actually taste like a dessert. For those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Crystal. I'm a raw vegan chef. I have an online culinary school where I show you how to make the most epic raw vegan recipes. All you need for this recipe is a food processor, a blender, and an 8x8 square pan. So I have an 8x8 square pan, and this is what we're going to use to form the bars. And then you need 2 pieces of parchment paper. So as you can see, we have some very nutritious ingredients out in front of us. We have some soaked and dehydrated almonds. Now you don't have to dehydrate them. You can just use raw almonds, or you can dry them at a low temperature in your oven. But I really like to neutralize the enzyme inhibitors, remove the phytic acid. But also I just really like the texture of soaked and dehydrated almonds much better than just raw almonds. And then we have some large flake coconut because I want a lot of texture in this recipe. We're going to be using some sprouted and dehydrated buckwheat. Now, if you don't have a dehydrator, again, you can just use raw buckwheat groats. But I like to make my ingredients more bioavailable, more nutritious. So by sprouting, it's becoming more alive. And then I'm dehydrating at a low temperature to retain those nutrients. And then we have some cacao nibs for some extra texture, coconut sugar and coconut nectar, which are my go-to favorite sweeteners. And then we have some superfood powders. I'm going to be using 2 tablespoons of mesquite powder, but you can use different variations such as maca powder or lucuma powder. I'm going to be using some ground golden flax just to act as a binder for the recipe. Some almond butter just to add in another depth of flavor and some more moisture. A little bit of salt just to balance out the recipe. A little bit of vanilla. And then we're going to be using some soaked and chopped apricots. The apricot and the orange, because we're going to be adding in some orange zest, with the chocolate is one of the best flavor pairing combinations. You're absolutely going to love the flavor pairing in this. So the very first thing you want to do is you want to process up the dry ingredients first before you add in your wet ingredients. And this is just a general rule of thumb when you're making any of my recipes. When I'm using a food processor, always add in the dry ingredients first. We're going to leave the cacao nibs because we're going to add that at the end because that's going to add some extra texture. Okay, so we have all the dry ingredients in there. Now the really important thing is you don't want to over process this because we're not going to be creating a flour. We want that texture like your granola bar. So I'm going to process this just for a few seconds. You can also use the pulse option as well. Okay, so that is it. We don't want to over process this. This looks good to me. There's still a lot of texture in there. I'll just give you a good view on what that looks like. You can see there's a lot of texture in here. We still have some chunks of almonds, the chunks of coconut, and the buckwheat. So this is what we want it to look like. So now I'm going to go ahead and add in the rest of the ingredients. We have our coconut nectar, almond butter, and you can use raw or roasted almond butter. It's totally up to you. I'm using a stone ground sprouted raw almond butter. I get it from Real Raw Food. So Real Raw Food here in BC. If you're in Canada, you can order it online. And my apricots. Make sure that your apricots are chopped before you add them in. It's just going to help with the processing. And then we're going to add in our beautiful orange zest. And then we're going to add in our vanilla, very last ingredient there. You can use any vanilla that you have on hand. You can use vanilla extract, vanilla powder, vanilla bean. I'm using a medicine flower vanilla extract, but they are a bit difficult to get internationally right now, so just use whatever vanilla you have on hand. So now what I want to do is I'm going to pulse this up. I don't want to process this. I want to pulse this up because, again, I want that texture, and I'm going to pulse it until it all starts sticking together. So now what I want to do is I just want to test this out and see if it's ready. You can see this beautiful texture that we have going on here. So if I can squeeze it in my hands and it forms, then we know it's done. So I have an 8x8 square pan and I have 2 pieces of parchment paper. So I'm just going to add in a piece of parchment paper going one way, and then I'm going to add the other piece going the other way. So now we're just going to add the batter into the pan. And then you're just going to start pressing the batter into the pan with your hands. So then what you can do to even this out even more is to use a spoon, and we're just going to graze the top just to get rid of those finger marks. So we have our batter all even in the pan, and the wonderful thing about this recipe is we don't have to wait for this component to set. We can just set it aside at room temperature, then we can get started on our chocolate ganache right away, which is our top layer. Okay, moving on to our dark chocolate ganache layer that is going to go on top of the granola bars. So I have my granola bar batter sitting here just at room temperature. So as you can see, we just have a few ingredients out in front of us. This recipe is really simple, and we're just going to be using a blender for this recipe. So we have some cacao powder, coconut nectar, vanilla, salt, coconut oil, which is going to act as our binder, firm the layer up. And then we're going to be adding in just a little bit of room temperature water at the end, and I'm going to show you the magic that this creates. So let's get these ingredients in the blender. Whenever you're dealing with cacao powder or any kind of powders that you're adding into the blender, you always want to add them in first before you add in the rest of the ingredients. Beautiful coconut nectar. Coconut nectar is actually low glycemic. It's 55 on the glycemic index and still contains a lot of minerals. So it's overall just a really nutritious sweetener. I'm going to be adding in some vanilla. So what we're going to do is we're going to blend this up first and then add the liquid in last. So I'm going to start on low speed with this. And I'm just going to grab my spatula and get some of the cacao powder out of the corners. Then you might need your tamper for this recipe as well. So as you can see, we didn't need to blend that very long, and I only needed to blend it on low speed. You don't need to go to high speed with this. So this is what this looks like before we add in the water. So what you want to do is, because it is really thick right now and it's difficult to blend, I'm just going to pop that in, and then I'm going to turn it on low speed. So now, as you can see, again, we only needed to blend that just for a few seconds. You don't want to overblend this. So the consistency is like a thick chocolate sauce or a thick chocolate fudge. So now we're going to add this right on top of our granola batter. So now you can use your spatula and just move it around just to even it out. And what you can do as well is just tap it on the counter. So there's our dark chocolate ganache, and that is it. Super simple for this recipe. So now all we have left to do is put this in the freezer for a few hours, come back, we're gonna cut these into bars, and then finally dive in. Okay, our Apricot Cacao Superfood Granola bars have been setting in the freezer, and you actually don't need to set them for that long. They were only in there for a couple of hours and they're ready to go. So I can cut these, And we want to first trim the edges off before we cut these into bars. Now, you want to have a ruler on hand. I have a clear ruler because we're going to measure out the 2 by 2 squares. And you can eat these edges, so snack on them while you're chopping these bars. You can see this beautiful texture with the chocolate ganache. Oh, I absolutely love it. So now we're going to cut these into 2 by 2 squares, and you can see from my ruler that this is perfectly 8 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to score at the 2-inch mark. So I'm going to score at 2 inches, 4 inches, and 6 inches. And then at 4, and then at 6. And then I'm just going to chop these where I scored them. Okay, so I have my 2-inch slices. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use my ruler and score again at the 2-inch mark here. Okay, so I've cut my bars and I've transferred them to white cutting board just so you can see the contrast. And I just want to show you how delicious and amazing these look. So these have become really popular. I actually posted this recipe last year, and a lot of the students make them. Don't those look so good? So we have to try one here, obviously. Look at how good those look. Wow. The texture, the flavor, everything is just top notch. If you do make it, I'd love to see a photo in our public Facebook group, Chefs of Crystal Dawn Culinary. Let me know if you have any questions. You can put them in the comments below. Also, let me know if you would like to see more videos like this. Like and subscribe. If you want to learn more recipes, you can check out crystaldawnculinary.com. I have free recipes on my website as well as online courses. And I will see you in the next video.